was slow in joining with those who recommended the introduction of ground forces in South Vietnam, but it became perfectly clear something had to be done.
General Maxwell Taylor, a four-star general and chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under President John F. Kennedy, reflects on his reluctance and eventual conviction about the Vietnam War. In the mid-1960s, the United States is facing some hard choices in regards to the situation in Vietnam. Forces from the People's Army of North Vietnam seek to unify the country under communist rule, while the U.S. military has provided South Vietnam with military advisors, equipment, vehicles, and limited troop support. The question still remains: will the United States enter into a full-scale war with North Vietnam? With the United States Cavalry's new designations and capabilities, many are of the mind that the U.S. might hold an advantage over the North Vietnamese. The 1st Cavalry Division, Air Mobile, also called the 1st Air Cavalry Division, is organized in 1965. By using helicopters, the unit is now capable of using the vehicles for a variety of battlefield applications, such as large-scale troop movements, cargo lifts, medevacs, and aerial rocket and machine gun artillery. Ideally, air cavalry units lifted the burden on infantry units, who would have had to navigate the harsh jungle terrain in Vietnam on foot. But will the cavalry's new capabilities be sufficient to secure victory in Vietnam?
If you went to the CIA and said, "How is the situation in South Vietnam?" I think they would say it's worse. You see it in the desertion rate. You see it in the morale. You see it in the difficulty to recruit people. You see it in the gradual loss of population control. Many of us in private would say that things are not good. They've gotten worse.
The 1st Air Cavalry Division makes its first flights under its newest designation during the Vietnam War. But in 1951, the United States military first uses helicopters for airlift and medevac operations during the Korean War. On September 13, 1951, a battalion of United States Marines are tasked with clearing enemy combatants from the area surrounding an extinct volcano, referred to by the Marines as the Punch Bowl. During Operation Windmill No. 1, the Marines utilized 7 HRS-1 helicopters to deliver over 18,000 pounds of supplies and evacuate over 70 seriously wounded soldiers. The HRS-1 helicopters used by the Marines during Operation Windmill are a version of the H-19 Chickasaw line of helicopters especially built for the Marines. Beginning in 1951 in Korea, the H-19 undergoes live service tests on the battlefield. Operating under the 6th Transportation Company, the Chickasaw, as an unarmed transport helicopter, was put to the test in a variety of missions, from medical evacuations to tactical control to frontline cargo support. 5 years later, in 1956, the British Royal Marines 4-5 Commando Battalion executed the first combat helicopter insertion with air assault. During an amphibious landing as a part of Operation Musketeer during the Suez Crisis, 10 Westland Whirlwind Mark IIs delivered 23 tons of equipment and 650 Marines. As early as 1961, the United States Army was sending CH-2 transport helicopters to the South Vietnamese troops. Operation Chopper begins on December 23, 1961. Initially, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam successfully utilized the helicopters, but soon the Viet Cong developed strong counter-helicopter attack strategies. And by January, 13 of 15 have been hit by enemy fire and 4 have been shot down completely. Even after April of 1962, when the United States begins sending Marine helicopter squadrons to aid the ARVN forces, Viet Cong fighters prove tenacious. And during 1964's Operation Sure Wind, 17 out of 21 helicopters are hit, and 3 of them are shot down. Back in the United States, the U.S. House of Representatives Minority Leader, Gerald Ford, gives an address to the National Press Club in which he let communist rulers and the American people know that the U.S. is working with and for the people of South Vietnam, and we will not bow to any communist forces.
The communist leaders in Moscow, Peking, and Hanoi must fully understand that the United States considers the freedom of South Vietnam vital to our interests, and they must know that we are not bluffing in our determination to defend those interests.
Many elected officials like Ford espouse a clear goal of victory over communist forces through American ingenuity and the physical and technological strength of its military. In reality, the problem of how to win a war in Vietnam, especially on an unfamiliar battlefield that is mostly harsh jungle terrain, raises a host of doubts in the United States military's true capabilities. At Fort Benning, Georgia, in February of 1963, the United States Army begins to experiment with combining light infantry with helicopter support. The 11th Air Assault Division's training exercises result in some disagreement about the tactical success of the unit. But even at the caution of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara pushes the unit forward under the counterinsurgency doctrine recently established by the Pentagon. As a result, the 11th Air Assault Division is merged with the 2nd Infantry Division and redesignated the 1st Air Cavalry Division. On November 14, 1965, Lieutenant Colonel Harold G. Moore leads one unit of the 1st Air Cavalry into the first large-scale helicopter assault, not only of the Vietnam War, but in U.S. military history. The 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, carries with them a tradition of excellence and leadership, but its history is also a burden of bad omens. General George Custer himself led the 7th Cavalry into battle in June of 1876 at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Would the 1st Battalion emerge as the first successful air cavalry landing and assault mission? Or would they be doomed to repeat history? Army Specialist Jack P. Smith, who would later go on to work as an Emmy-winning news correspondent, recalled the Battle of Ia Drang Valley in a 2003 speech given to fellow veterans of the battle.
It is November 1965, the Ia Drang Valley. The nearest town, Pleiku, a remote Vietnamese province capital, and west of town, beyond the stilted long huts of the Montagnards, flat scrub jungle cover the hills by the Cambodian border, a smuggler's haven, and now the infiltration route for the first North Vietnamese regulars to invade South Vietnam. American regular infantry, the first sent to Vietnam as the war escalates, have come to this border country to hunt the People's Army of Vietnam. They are the men of the 1st Air Cav, the 1st Army Infantry Division to ride into war in helicopters. The leading unit is Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore's 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment. Driving their choppers into a landing zone designated X-Ray, a few miles from the Cambodian border, on the 14th of November 1965, they land on top of a North Vietnamese Army base. A ferocious battle ensues that lasts 3 whole days. Hal Moore's battalion several times comes within inches of being overrun. In the end, reinforced to brigade strength, the U.S. troops destroy the better part of a North Vietnamese division at X-Ray. 79 Americans are killed, 121 wounded, a total of 200 U.S. casualties, the highest toll of the war till then. But there are roughly 2,000 North Vietnamese casualties. I came in on the last day of the battle. I remember the NVA bodies with piled so thick around the foxholes you could walk on them for 100 feet in some places. The American GIs were the same color as the dirt, and all had that 1,000-yard stare of those newly initiated to combat. The next day, after a restless night, my battalion, 2-7, walked away from X-Ray toward another clearing called LZ Albany. Around lunchtime, we were jumped by a North Vietnamese formation. Like us, about 500 strong. Fighting was hand-to-hand. I was lying so close to a North Vietnamese machine gunner that I simply stuck out my rifle and blew off his head. It was, I think, the only time during the war that a U.S. battalion was ever overrun. The U.S. casualties for this fourth day of battle, 155 killed, 121 wounded. More dead than wounded. The North Vietnamese suffered a couple of hundred casualties. The fight at LZ Albany was largely overlooked as an aberration. Poor leadership, green troops. In this first encounter between their main force regulars, the two sides focused instead on X-ray. Interestingly, both drew the same conclusion, that each could win using the tactics of attrition.
2 days and nights of intense battle, the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry digs in at location X-ray and manages to repel their North Vietnamese and Viet Cong attackers. 1 day after the Battle of Ia Drang, however, the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry is unable to escape an attack from the North Vietnamese near location Albany. This attack remains the most successful ambush of United States forces throughout the Vietnam War. While the outcome of that ambush is clear, the Battle of Ia Drang sees both sides claiming victory. The North Vietnamese wildly overestimates United States losses at 1,500 to 1,700, when the number was in fact just over 200. And the United States reported over 1,000 North Vietnamese killed, while the number is closer to 600. The question of victory remains unanswered, but the battle still stands as the first successful air assault by U.S. cavalry, and indeed the first proper battle between the North Vietnamese and the United States Army. Ia Drang can even be seen as a kind of trial by fire for the use of tactics by both sides in the Vietnam War. The North Vietnamese learn that engaging the Americans swiftly and at close range gives them an advantage, while the United States Army now had a successful air assault under their belt, meeting their goals on the battlefield through air mobility, artillery fire, and close air support. Commanding officer for the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, Harold Hal Moore, who receives the Distinguished Service Cross for his unwavering courage and leadership by example during the action at location X-Ray, presents the challenges faced by the Air Cavalry in his after-action report. After-action report, Ia Drang Valley Operation 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, 14 through 16, November 1965. Commanding Officer, 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, Air Mobile. Due to last-minute positioning of the artillery pieces caused by air movement delays, the preparatory fires did not begin until 10:17 hours. I was in the lead aircraft and had a good view of these fires. They were precisely where required and beautifully timed with the landing of lead elements of the assault company. Fires were concentrated principally around the landing zone, in the trees and high grass, and on a finger and in a draw leading down from the high ground northwest of X-Ray. The aerial artillery came in on the heels of the tube artillery fires and worked over the area for 30 seconds, expending half their loads, then went on into a nearby air orbit on call. The lift battalion gunships took up the fires and were immediately ahead of the UH-1Ds. As we came in for the assault landing, all door gunners fired into the trees and high grass. We landed and ran from the landing zone into the trees, firing our M16s at likely enemy positions. On the ground, we received no enemy fire and made no contact upon landing. The terrain was flat and consisted of scrub trees up to 100 feet high, thick elephant grass varying in height from 1 foot to 5 feet, and anthills throughout the area, up to 8 feet high, with thick brush and elephant grass on and around them. Along the western edge of the LZ, the trees and grass were especially thick and extended off into the jungle on the foothills of the mountain. At approximately 11:20 hours, one of the recon squads took a prisoner. I immediately took my S2 and the Vietnamese, Mr. Nick, and went to the location and questioned him. He was unarmed, dressed in dirty khaki shirt and trousers, with a serial number on one of the shirt epaulets, and carried an empty canteen. He stated that he had eaten only bananas for 5 days, and that there were 3 battalions on the mountain above us who wanted very much to kill Americans, but had been unable to find them. He stated that he was in the North Vietnamese Army. Around 12:45 hours, lead elements of Company B began to engage in a firefight of moderate intensity. Shortly afterwards, at approximately 13:30 hours, Commanding Officer Company B reported that he was being attacked heavily by at least 2 companies of enemy and that his right platoon was in danger of being surrounded and cut off from the rest of the company by numerically superior force. The firefight became intense. Also, a few rounds of 60 and 81 millimeter mortar fire began falling in the LZ and on B Company. B Company also received some rocket fire. By 17:40 hours, I decided that it was necessary to pull A and B companies, under cover of heavy supporting fires, back to the fringe of the landing zone and set up a tight defensive perimeter for the night. We were still in good communications with the surrounded platoon, and it was ringed with close-in artillery defensive fire. My intentions were to conduct another coordinated attack during the night or early the next morning to reach it, or to get them out during the night by infiltration. Joseph Galloway, a journalist who served 4 tours in Vietnam, and is the only civilian decorated with the Bronze Star Medal for valor during that war, remarks later that if nothing else, Ia Drang was the battle that convinced Ho Chi Minh that the United States could win. As the Air Cavalry made revolutionary use of helicopters and air support during the Vietnam War, the technology ultimately proves inefficient to win against the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong. In this memo to President Johnson sent shortly after the Battle of Ia Drang from U.S. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, says that the successful tactics employed by the Air Cav only seem to inspire enemy forces to step up their tactics and abilities and relentlessly pursue their goal of victory over the Americans.
The dramatic recent changes in the situation are on the military side. They are the increased infiltration from the north and the increased willingness of the communist forces to stand and fight, even in large-scale engagements. The Ia Drang River campaign of early November is an example. Communist casualties and desertions can be expected to go up if my recommendations for increased U.S., South Vietnamese, and third-party forces are accepted. Nevertheless, the enemy can be expected to enlarge his present strength of 110 battalion equivalents to more than 150 battalion equivalents by the end of calendar 1966, when hopefully his losses can be made to equal his input.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.